point, I'm going to start recording. You may or may not, or you're not you, but your validation sample, the users that you validate with, they will, from the feedback validation study, will determine if that requirement does or does not validate the risk. So again, this linking of risks to all the different things, either directly or secondarily through a chain of links, is really, really critical. So before I go through this list, I will show you the old way of doing it, which I'm pretty sure everybody has seen. So this is the first iteration of my technical file. I developed my own medical device software. We're pre-registration at the moment, but it's non-unregulated versions on the market. But when I first started my quality management system, so I do have an ISO certification, this is what I worked with, which, coming from traditional document-based quality management system, these sort of tables are very, very common. Everybody's seen them. And this is what it looks like in PDF, and that's zoomed in. I'm at 200% right, but you try and get these onto one page. I'm sure you've seen it too, where they get PDF printed, nobody can read them. And it's worse if they try to put them on paper or we have bad resolution. So, this is one of the constraints with documents. You're really putting there is a lot to risk management, documenting a risk and taking it through the process. And our traditional MS Office-based, document-based quality management systems are just, they just can't handle it. Although we have been working this way for years. So some of the benefits then, let's make that full screen, apologies, is in the old ways, only one person can work on a file at one time, right? Now that changes a little bit with some of the cloud-based tools, but generally, you've got one file, one person in it. Whereas you've got ticketing systems, team members can collaborate multiple items at any one time. So you can really get the benefit of collaboration and asynchronous ways of working, that you don't all have to be looking at the same item at the same time. Access to the file is all or nothing. Generally, you can control access to full read write or just read, but you cannot control access to fields or subbits. To a degree, I know you can, but if you're really going to spend that time to do it, it's not really sustainable. Whereas risk tickets can be configured depending on team roles. And then, also in risk, you kind of have three major areas. You've got your 62366 usability risks, you've got your clinical risk, and you kind of got your technical risk, which I would put cyber under there. And so, there are ways of giving ownership to sub backlogs within the risks to different team members. So you can have one holistic risk list, which is segregated into different areas with different owners, and you can configure the tool chain so different people can manage different backlogs depending on their specialty. Excel has limited track changes. You do have some level of track changes, but you get different versions of the file, gets passed around, you lose it. Whereas with just native Jira or plugins, you can actually fully log what happens in any one ticket. Excel, you only get one view of the data. Okay, you can do pivots, so maybe it's a bit more than one. Whereas with the ticketing-based systems, the ticket is just like a little database, row in your database. You can use Jira, Confluence, other tools to actually spin up multiple reports of the same underlying data. And that's a really important for the next one, where in traditional document-based, the content is the final format. You kind of don't have a choice. Whether when you're working in ticketing systems, you can generate multiple different sort of reports in different formats for different purpose. So when you're doing a review, for example, of the first, the hazard identification, you don't need to see the risk mitigations, right? So you can have a report which you run. You just look at the hazardous scenario. Well, whereas if you're looking at the mitigations, then you just have a look at the first mitigations, right? The pre-mitigated risk, etc. So you really need different formats and different stages in your process. And using Jira, Confluence, etc., you can run different types of reports to address that. Excel, this is a really key point. It's very difficult to link your risk to design. Sorry, it's design verifications typo there. Sorry, design elements and verification. Can do it manually by ID numbers, sometimes linking to other things, but it's very painful. With ticketing systems, you've got the linking function. Difficult to review risk against mitigations. So again, linking, seeing the content of a mitigation. So you might have the summary of what the mitigation is. To actually look at the full detail of the risk and the full detail of the mitigation together can be difficult, and I'll show you how we do it in Jira and Confluence. Versioning of risks is tricky, I would say, at best, because you've got to manage the whole versioning of a spreadsheet with the versioning of different elements. Problems. Whereas in tickets, it's quite easy to version, and there are tools, plugins you can use to use that, or there are manual processes. So that's kind of what I want to demonstrate today. If there's questions, feel free to, we're a small group, so feel free to just comment in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it, and I can address things, so don't let me lose you. So really important part here is toolchain configuration. That's what's going to get you there. And my configuration is based on boards, okay? So, sorry, I thought I had it here. If you just give me a second. Get the file up. Yeah, here we go. So this is a very brief overview of my toolchain. We've got development environment, which is generally just an IDE with whatever frameworks or other tools they need on their device. Code. We've got Jira cloud instance, which we'll cover, Confluence and Jira and X-Ray and all the plugins. GitHub, where we keep the code and we use some of the services there for build agents. We've got Amazon EC2 environments, right? So this is development and production infrastructure, because obviously EC2 is also a production environment. And then if you look at the configuration of Jira, these are all the ticket types I use. So I won't go through all of them now, but you would have seen on the presentation I have, the design V, each of those had the Jira icon on them. So, product requirements, there's a specific ticket for product requirements. There's a specific ticket for software requirements, etc. My development backlog or detailed backlog has multiple tickets for different reasons. And then we've got risk tickets, okay? And if we go into Jira, you can see here on the left-hand side, I organize it in boards. So, PRQ is my code for product requirements, SRS for software requirement specifications, SDD, detail design, RSX, etc., verification doc. And just to show you here, again, it's not the purpose, but I've also got components which reflect the high-level architecture and the sub-architecture. So, every ticket that I process at some point, obviously not at the requirements level, I can track via my components, and these components are documented in my architecture document. Okay, so my tool chain is configured in line with the design development processes, and also aligned with the product architecture. So if we come here and look at this as a timeline view, and the only reason I show you the timeline view because it's got this useful expansion, the epics as a parent. I can expand these. I'm in the wrong board. Second. We go to the risk board. We have a board here. There's obviously a query behind it. And this picks up two things. It picks up epic tickets, which I just use as a parent. And given Jira recently, they've allowed you to do parents, and I use the same Epic ticket across the different boards, but you can also now create a specific risk parent ticket if you want to do that in your configuration. There are benefits for that. There's downsides as well. It's up to you. And then we've got risk tickets. This is my recycle folder where I get my junk tickets. But you can see here, for example, that I've got different categories of risks. So, for my risk analysis, it's a diagnostic app. So compatible diagnostics is obviously a risk. And that could come from out-of-date product, misused products, defective products, what have you, right? Risk come from instructions for use, user interface issues, results issues, risks coming from the use cases, health use cases, medical use cases, again, some cybersecurity, authentication, data at rest, transit, etc., right? I have a long way to go on my risk file, but you can get the shape. So that's the epics. And again, I just use the epics, not in necessarily an agile sense, just in a parent-child sense, just as a grouping of risk tickets of risks of a similar type. And then I can expand it and go into it. And you can see here that I have risk tickets under there for that grouping. And this is really good because it allows you, however you want to do it, however you want to group it, it's fine. And as I said before, with different sort of ownership of risks, you could create a different board for 62366 usability risks, or a different board for cybersecurity risks, however you want to do it. You can create parents of parents to group it. So now you can have multiple levels in Jira. So, there's a lot of opportunity here to organize this however you want to, just to make it easier, because you really need to do that summary level, because the risks really do get detailed, I'm sure, as everyone knows. So the organization of your risk backlog is really important. And then, you've got the timeline view, you've got your backlog view, as you can tell. And here, is similar sort of principle. Again, I'm still working through these, where you can create sprints of different categories. And again, you're not coding here, so it's very different from an implementation sprint. It's very much could be, okay, we have a sprint of tickets which are under review. And, again, sprints is just a category of tickets, you could say, and it's a work status somehow. And it's up to you how you want to do it, but there's different techniques you can use it. Again, where some companies struggle with, because sprints have a very defined definition, or the functionality is very linked to a definition with agile processes, with a bit of flexible thinking, you've got that as you look at it just core functionality, you can work out how to use the core functionality of Jira, which is based on agile principles, to manage your risk backlogs. I'm not going to tell you how to do that here, but again, if you're going to do it in your design development plan, you need to document that. And then again, active sprints. Again, I'm not using it at the moment, but I will. Gives you an idea of where things are working. So hopefully that's clear. I think we've got development people on the call, so that should hopefully be clear. And then we start getting into different views. So this is a plugin called Links Explorer. It's a pretty good product. I use it for all my coverage tools. And you can also, it's got like different traceability tools. And when I was doing this, I researched a whole bunch of products. This is the best one I found for Jira. And again, kind of doesn't matter as long as you're comfortable with it. But what we're doing here is looking at the coverage of a risk ticket with items that are, mitigated. So the parent here, that's just the epic. I'm just going to hide that field so we don't look at it, but it can be useful. And the way I link it is I use a link type mitigated by. So if we come here, this is the risk ticket, and we'll go into the configuration of the risk ticket in a second. But you can see here the linked issue is done by a mitigated by link type. So I think I set that up myself, can't remember. But again, that's in my design and development plan in the traceability section of my design and development plan, which I'll show you just very, very quickly here. So this is a really key part of the design and development plan is you need to be able to document how your traceability is going to work. Sorry, I think I'm in a really old version here, but basically in the let's see, get the one. Yeah, so this is my documentation. That's not there. Okay, there we go. So this is the updated version. And you can see here, we've got the queries we use for the different traceability reports, for the different backlogs, filters. And this is the configuration of the Links Explorer. I won't go into it. It makes sense. It's a bit messy. And then these are the other reports I use for my traceability. We're going to see some of them in a second. So, again, what we're doing with REST, why as I said before, the traceability is so important, is that you need to be able to trace different items of different types through your technical file. So again, I use the mitigation link type. And what you can see here, if we go down to some of these I've started working on, you can see here, for example, read and write external storage is a risk. And then we've got this linked to a cybersecurity risk for data at rest for at the product requirement level. And then we've got storage, sensitive data leakage at the spec. So that's a requirement, that's the spec level. And we can go into some detail. We'll go to that next. I'm not going to address it now, but we have two tickets which mitigate this risk. And again, we have one from the product requirement. We have one from the specification. Now, you could have one for your detailed design as well if you wanted to. And I think that could be a good idea. But also, given that the specification is implemented by the design, if you're sort of verifying the design, by default, you're sort of verifying the specification as well. So, I think it's really a risk class issue on how to do it. So if you're a class C software, you can cause death. I would definitely recommend linking it. If you're a or B risk product, it may be a bit overkill. It really depends on the team. But if you do link your detailed design tickets, then that's really good. So again, you've got the links here. And then we've got, we come here, this is Confluence now. And I use a plugin, it's called Snapshot Explorer. And something I found consulting is that some teams don't separate between a coverage report and a report like this, which I call a verification report. And for me, they're related but very separate, and they're used for separate issues. So obviously, you need to make sure if a risk needs to be mitigated, it needs to be covered by a ticket with the mitigated by link type, requirement, spec, detailed design. That's okay. That shows you the coverage. But you really need to be looking at the detail of the ticket, of the risk, versus the detail of the links ticket, so you can determine if it's a valid mitigating action. So for example, here, this is I'll just zoom in a little bit. We have here that, again, this is my categorization. It's a health use case. It's a urine-based assay, and the hazard is from an expired product. So the user determines a result from an expired urine dipstick. They enter the invalid result into the product, and then they make a health decision on this invalid result, right? So we can dive into here, if I open that on the risk ticket. And my risk ticket is configured to have different fields. So we've got the description of the case. We've kind of got the use error, failure mode, other problem description. And here, the user doesn't check the expiry date of the urine dipstick prior to use. I've got these other sort of fields I use to be able to filter and segregate my list. So I've got two use cases. We've got a health use case, a medical use case. The hazard category is the hazards coming from the compatible products. The cause is expired product, and the harm is an inaccurate health measurement. So here, these are just text entry fields, right? And again, this is useful. I have the text entry fields here because they're good for planning. So when you're doing the hazard analysis, you identify, well, how can we mitigate it? And you can just write it in here. And then later on, you can go and create your mitigating tickets. And then at the end of the day, you can always check to see, I've got 2 mitigating actions here. I've got 2 tickets. Does it make sense? And then you can also start discussing verification issues. But again, that's how I do it. You can do it yourself. The point is that these tickets, the risk tickets, can be configured to match your risk management process. And here I've got a plugin, Soft Comply. It's not a great plugin, but it's not a bad plugin. And the real advantage is that you can do your risk assessment here, your initial risk assessment, and then your residual risk assessment, and it will calculate the risk for you. And you can use this calculated field in reports so you can demonstrate if initial risk is low. Theoretically, I don't have to mitigate it, right? Because health, if I'm doing a ketone measurement and I'm not a diabetic, type A diabetic, it doesn't matter if the result's wrong, because it's not going to harm you, right? There's a medical use case that could be serious. So it depends on the use case, the harm. But yeah, you can use this risk mitigation for your reporting and determine, do I have to mitigate? And if I do have to mitigate, is it mitigated? Is it acceptable risk or not? So these reports here, this is a plugin where you can link tickets, you can display any field in the ticket on the report. And as a team, you can go here and say, well, that's the hazard situation. These are mitigation. You can go through and read it. And as a team, you can look at the same screen, either in the same room, in a meeting, in a video meeting separately. And you can actually go in and, say, well, is that right? Is that not right? And then obviously something you can't do in Excel is, go there and you can comment, change it, etc. But you need to be careful here. I believe anybody should be able to comment, or anybody with the right role should be able to comment, but only certain people should be able to update core information. So maybe a risk manager will take the comments and then they can make a decision to update it, right? So again, people can review this anytime. The comments are updated, the risk manager get a notification, and then they can either accept it, reject it, put it into the process. So it can be a pretty cool way to do it. Yeah, and again, in terms of format, this is just one format here where we've got a very simple one. We're looking at the risk case. We're looking at the potential mitigations, and then you can have other formats where you may want to show everything. So if we look at this one here, you've got a lot more fields. You've got description, the harm, the severity, probability, oops, and then you've got the mitigating actions, and you can add whatever fields you want to add. And again, as I said before, for reporting, you may want to do the full risk matrix. But if it's just for certain stages for reviews or interim, you may want to show things in a useful way. So you can see here, this doesn't fit on this screen. This is just sharing my laptop screen. But if you've got a big meeting screen, it can be better. But you've got the flexibility here to link and review and work collaboratively, which is obviously the key advantage of these tools. Hi, Tejas. So let me just see what else I've got. Yeah, and so this methodology as well, I've got 2 projects. I've got a project for my product development, which is my dev product. And I also have a product for my tool chain, which I'm building at the moment. And I've got the same sort of concept for the tool chain. So, for example, here I've got a risk that I lose my code base from GitHub. Now, it's pretty low risk, for example, but what GitHub do is they provide a API where you can API your code to a backup storage, locally, Amazon, wherever. So you can see here that the risk of losing my code base is a 24-hour backup, which is not a product related, it's a toolchain related. And in medical device, obviously you need to validate your toolchain. So having a separate product with toolchain requirements, risks, specifications, verification, your tests, etc., is really valuable and helpful too. And again, you never get it right the first go, but you do a few iterations, then you get on top of it. And then probably the final one I would say is that for your risk report, what you can do is either print directly from Confluence. There are tools for PDFs. Oh yeah, hi Tejas. No problem. I'll make the recording available on YouTube. I'll drop it in the LinkedIn chat. Okay. So thanks for joining. So yeah, so you can either PDF it, or what I do is I export in Markdown format. Generally, from here I do export to Markdown. I put in my Git repo, and that way I can have pretty good line by line control, and I've got a way of versioning my documents. So that's the presentation. It's pretty quick and dirty. Great, thanks, Tejas. So if you've got any questions, please let me know. So Dinesh, you're the only one on the call. So if you've got any questions, please, now's your time. No questions, Dinesh? Which documents are you talking about, Dinesh? Sorry, Dinesh, I don't understand the question. Oh, there's kind of no documents available. What I do have, if you're interested, I do run a private professional network where we discuss these in detail, and we do have a private GitHub where we share the documents, but that's only for the members of the group. So we've got meetings every week, we've got a private chat, and we've got a private Git repo where we share the information. So you're welcome to join that. It's $90 a year. You can sign up online, and yeah, happy to share it to you. But yeah, again, sorry about that. That's just for members. Okay then. Well, thank you very much for attending. Appreciate that. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to have a call with you anytime, or chat. So feel free to message me if you've got questions. And yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. Have a good evening. Bye bye.